welcome to Rally FC. That's right, Rally FC, the Ghostwriter podcast. This podcast is about as good of a time traveler as Ghostwriter is, which is to say, not very good. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. My name is Clay Johnson, but I am not alone. I have here with me a friend of mine. Everyone welcome Alicia Farrar. How are you?
I'm doing magnificent, Clay. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's great to have you here. I have not spent a lot of time with you in many years, so it's great
many moons.
Yes, it's great to have this opportunity to have you on. And I didn't mention, but you are a middle school teacher?
I am 7th grade science.
Oh wow! Now see, I knew you were a teacher. I didn't know what subject you taught, though. That's impressive. It's makes me not want to bring up anything sciencey because I'll probably get it all
you'd be
wrong.
Surprised.
All right. Well, Alicia, I have to ask you a question. It's a question I ask all my guests. Very important.
Okay. No pressure.
Alicia, how much do you hate me for asking you to watch this show?
I don't hate you. That's what's funny. Is it's really funny because when Clay first approached me about talking about Ghostwriter, I was like, oh my God, that's a blast from the past.
Yeah, you're one of the few people I talked to that had any clue what I was talking about.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I was a huge Ghostwriter fan back in the day. Like, it used to come on in the afternoons on PBS, and so I would like rush home. And
Nice.
in the middle of when I was watching, and it was a riveting thing. And in the middle of when I was watching, we all of a sudden lost PBS, and I wasn't able. And so it was just this like mystery tickling in the back of my mind for years and years and years. So I'm glad that I finally had that taken care of. Clay was kind enough to send me some links, so mystery squelched. I'm greatly appreciative of.
Yeah, and if memory serves from our conversation, the episode that you left in the middle of was the episode that we actually just covered. So this was actually continuing your Ghostwriter education, I guess.
Yep, true.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's jump right into this episode. This episode is story number 11, Just in Time. This is the famous time-traveling episode of Ghostwriter. And I have to say, I was vaguely aware of what was known of Ghostwriter, and I always felt like this was kind of the more kind of well-known stories of Ghostwriter, but like I said, you apparently had never seen this before.
No.
This episode.
I'm not 100%. I have seen it, period, but it's good times. Yeah, I was more towards like the beginnings. So this is in the middle of my education. Sure. But yeah, I always was a huge fan of like time traveling TV shows. Like Wishbone was always my jam because it had so many period pieces to it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, this one, like you said, it does involve time travel. Basically, the plot of this episode, as we saw in the last episode, Ghostwriter told the team, after they had just gotten back together and solved all of their differences, he decides that something very important is happening, that he must leave and help. And apparently, Ghostwriter had no clue where this person was. We'll talk about that more in a second. But he does end up going back to the year 1928 and helping a young boy named Frank and Catherine. Frank is being accused of stealing a tea set from Catherine's family, and basically her father is threatening to kick him out or send him to the Wayward Boys Home, which Frank does not want any part of. And also, Frank wants to be a doctor when he grows up. And wouldn't you know it, Jamal's dad starts getting sick. I wonder if these things are connected.
Curious.
Yes. But that is the basic plot. I will say there are a couple of things that I want to talk about real quick. Just as we first start, the very first frame of this episode, Jamal is reading a book. We walk in, Jamal is reading a book, and Lenny walks in to talk to him. And the book Jamal is reading is My Side of the Mountain.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Are you familiar with this book?
Fun fact about this book.
Okay.
This book I used to read a lot of male-centric literature as a kid because, of course, I was a bit of a tomboy.
Sure.
And so I never completely identified with, my gender. And so I always would read like Huckleberry Finn. I used to read the Hardy Boys like it was going out of style. Like those were my absolute favorites. So My Side of the Mountain was a book that I actually got as a suggestion from my librarian, and I had to look through the Dewey Decimal System to find it.
Okay. Which we also see in this story.
Oh, yeah, right? I was like, oh, man. But it was really interesting because, of course, I loved that book. And like a lot of the survival tips are stuff that I actually used later in my life simply because I read that book. And what's super interesting, especially that it's that specific book, is that sometimes other teachers will give away their classroom libraries if they're moving because, we accumulate stuff. We are professional hoarders.
Sure.
And as it so happens, one of the books in the pile was My Side of the Mountain. And I snatched that up. It had a hole in the front cover. The pages were tattered, but I was like, yes, this is happening. Nice. And what's super, super cool about it is that I actually had a young man in my class who finished a test early. I was like, do you like to read? And he's like, absolutely, I do. I was like, cool. You can read this, and if you enjoy it, you can borrow it. So right now, that's actually with him. So
nice.
Yeah, I loved that book. I loved that book.
That's awesome. Now, I am curious, though, since you actually have knowledge of I just skimmed like the plot details. Does that book correspond at all with this plot?
So the basic story is a boy who's been lost.
Okay.
So in a lot of ways, I would say so. So what ends up happening, long story short, in My Side of the Mountain, is that this young man gets separated from his group, and he finds himself in the absolute wilderness, and he has to basically start surviving from what he knows off the top of his head. So he's kind of like a young man out of place, and it's very interesting. And so he kind of like claims this side of the mountain, and it becomes his side of the mountain. And he basically like uses all of his knowledge and skills to survive. And it's very interesting. So I don't know, in a weird way, I guess it does.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some vague connections.
Very vague.
But yeah, I mean, in most movies, the cute reference here would have been H.G. Wells' The Time Machine.
Yes, absolutely.
Or something akin to that. Whereas Ghostwriter, because it's an educational show, they're just going to show you a book. It's like, you should read this book. Doesn't have a whole lot to do with this story, but you should read it. A little bit. Yeah.
No, it is a pretty fantastic book about, it's like a young boy finding himself. So.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that it was a Newbery Award winner, which I remember hearing all about when I was a kid. Well, there you go. So yeah, we do have that scene. Basically, they're just discussing the fact that Ghostwriter still is not back. Basically, it is over the summer. I'm guessing towards the end of the summer because the kids look markedly older. We'll talk a little bit about some of those things later. But we also address the fact that Rob is not in this episode because Rob is with his family visiting Australia for the summer. They don't
as
really.
One does.
I'm sorry.
I said as one does.
Yeah, just visiting Australia. They don't really cover why he's visiting Australia. Just that
why not?
He is. Yeah. I mean, I wish I could do that. But I will say, I feel like it's a little bit of a lost opportunity because in the last episode, he seemed the one that was the most hurt by Ghostwriter taking off. And now when Ghostwriter comes back, he's not there.
No.
So, yeah, whatever. But then we do get a brief scene of a scene that we actually saw in the last story of a child writing a note basically saying that they're scared, they're in trouble. I have to say, though, this ADR is so apathetic. It's just like, help, I'm in trouble. I didn't do it. Like, seriously, this kid is giving Harrison Ford a run for his money in terms of apathetic ADR readings. Like,
no, pew pew. Let's go. Yeah, I get the reference. I got you.
But yeah, it's, we do establish that there is a kid that is in danger. But obviously our team is wanting Ghostwriter back. We are then introduced to kind of our main protagonists in this story. Like I said, Frank and Catherine. And I will say, I had a guest on a previous episode that was like, well, if you've got a show in New York and you've got two white characters, which is what we have. She was like, why, where's my Italian and my Irish kids? Where are they? It's like, this is New York. Where are my Italian and Irish kids? Here they are.
I feel like something that Ghostwriter always did really well is that you could tell, like, this was shot in Brooklyn.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
This was not a sound stage. This was not, somewhere else pretend to be New York. Like, it was New York. And, like, as much as I hated Calvin, like, he had a proper New York, Brooklyn accent. Yeah. And for that, I definitely have to respect.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the kids are all definitely local. Although we're going to talk about accents. Yes. But, yeah. But anyway, like I said, Frank and Catherine look to me, at least, like the typical Italian, Irish, New York kids. Although Frank, who is obviously an Italian New Yorker, his last name is Flynn, and they talk about the fact that he's from Ireland. I was like, that kid is not Irish.
You're the dark Irish, man. You know that.
Sure.
It's a stretch, admittedly.
It's a real stretch. I mean, honestly, I'm like, why couldn't you just make him an Italian kid? He didn't. There was no rule saying that he had to be an Irish kid, because he obviously isn't. Catherine, on the other hand, very much looks like she fits the part. I mean, her last name's Cannellan, so, it works. But these two kids, Catherine Cannellan, played by Grace Johnston, and Frank Flynn, played by Louis Tadero. Now, Louis Tadero, from what I saw on his IMDb, has only like one other credit besides this show, and it was the Cosby Mysteries.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And honestly, you can kind of see his lack of experience. He's okay, but he, especially with some of the other child actors on the show, you can tell the disparity of experience. Grace Johnston, on the other hand, number one, I remember seeing her specifically, I know, from The Cosby Show and a couple of other things that were on around this time. I mean, she's still an actor, doing roles here and there. Honestly, she looks strikingly like Evangeline Lilly.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. But the main thing about Catherine, I guess about Grace Johnston, is she has the most interesting accent I've ever heard. It's just so, like, it almost, like, it's nothing like this, but it reminds me of Katharine Hepburn. Like I said, it sounds nothing like Katharine Hepburn, but in that way that, like, Katharine Hepburn had that, that faux kind of English, oh, really, darling, that very kind of, just manufactured accent that you're like, this can't be real, but it was. And honestly, she wasn't the only one that had it, but this child just has this accent that I'm like, she's from New Jersey, I believe, but this doesn't sound at least like a typical Jersey accent. I mean, there is a clip. I do want to play this clip, but I do need to set it up. So, like I said, Frank is being accused of stealing a tea set from the family. They really have absolutely no evidence, except for the fact that when they first met him, he was actually trying to steal from them and had a bag full of their stuff, including the tea set. Now, where they think he's keeping it now, nobody has any clue. You know, they have really no evidence on their side, but because of this, at least accusation, Dr. Connellan, Catherine's father, is threatening to send Frank to the home of wayward boys. And so Catherine, who we learn has an enthusiasm for detective stories, has put herself on the case. And I have to say, her logic is a little thin. So I want to listen to this.
And what did Father say would happen to you if you were ever caught stealing again? He would kick me out. Ha! That proves he's on the level.
How, Officer Connellan?
Because Frank wouldn't steal anything. Because he likes living here. He doesn't want to get kicked out.
Yeah, that's not what we call evidence or proof. That's
right.
That's just an opinion. I mean, I will say it's just as much evidence as anybody else in the family has that he did take it. But
I'm kind of getting some like hints of Les Miserables, honestly. Like Jean Valjean being accused of stealing the silver a little bit.
Sure, of course. I mean, he did, but
he did. To be fair, in that particular case, he absolutely did.
Absolutely, yes. But yeah, I mean, what do you make of her accent? Because
it's honestly like it sounds like she's attempting to be a New Yorker, but she comes from the South, so she can't quite erase like the Appalachian out of her voice. Like that's what it's. It honestly almost sounds like Upper Louisiana Cajun.
It
Which
definitely
is very
sounds
strange to
like
say.
she's got a very strong accent trying to do something else.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know. It's so unique. And like I said, I remember seeing her on the Cosby Show, and from what I remember, it's the same accent. Like, I don't think she was really putting anything on for this. And I mean, what I remember of what I read on her IMDb says I think she was from around the area, but it's a distinct accent, that's for sure.
It is very distinct.
But in addition to Catherine and Frank, we have, like I said, Dr. Connellan, as well as the housekeeper, Mrs. O'Boyle, who is really the one accusing Frank of stealing the tea set. Really because of her own prejudices. She, experienced, basically her father was beaten by a group of, street toughs or, whatever derogatory term she would prefer to use. And basically she just lumps Frank in with them, really for no good reason, just other than the fact that the first time they met him, he was stealing, but, Catherine's father obviously decided to give him a second chance. So far, he seems to be, proving his worth, but she can't see past his past, basically. And also on her side is Catherine's little sister, Lucy, played by Steffi Leinberg, who... one of those faces that pops out to me because I remember watching the movie Richie Rich a bunch when I was a kid, and she's the young girl in that. She's also still acting. But Lucy and Mrs. O'Boyle, I feel like Lucy has this, what I feel is a very unhealthy attachment to Mrs. O'Boyle. Because here's the thing, like, she follows her around everywhere. Every time Mrs. O'Boyle has to go on an errand, Lucy wants to go. She's like attached to her hip, but her devotion to Mrs. O'Boyle causes her to do really despicable things and, basically support the backwards attitudes that Mrs. O'Boyle has towards Frank simply because she likes Mrs. O'Boyle.
Well, do you think maybe it's like a surrogate mother situation?
I think that it is.
Cannelin ever shown?
I mean, they never really talk much about their mother. I will say I do think that a good bit of her attachment, possibly from the mother, but I think that one thing that is explained to us is that another one of the reasons that Lucy kind of is against Frank and kind of supports him being kicked out of the house is that basically she's jealous of Frank. She believes that he has stolen her sister Catherine from her. Lucy basically believes that if Frank is out of the way, then Catherine and her will be friends and sisters again.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, at this point, in the story, she is not very likable. I basically just wrote, Lucy's a little snot, because she is. She is just...
She is very much the atypical, brat.
Yeah, I mean, she says this.
I hope my father throws you out tonight.
Yeah. Well, you don't say that to a child who is down on their luck, has lost their parents. I mean, that's the main reason he was stealing, because he's an orphan, basically. And all of the options for orphans at that time were not pleasant.
Mm-mm.
So,
not at all.
So, obviously she's selfish, but she doesn't recognize anyone's side in it but her own is the situation. But yeah, so, that's really, setting up this whole situation. So, basically Frank and Catherine are determined to figure out who it was that stole the tea set so that they can prove to Dr. Connellan that he didn't do it. I mean, I will say the rules in this house sound pretty messed up in a justice sense. I mean, it's basically guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
Because, like I said, they have no proof that Frank did this. My biggest question is
prior experience. Actually,
they have the one.
Yeah,
and really, it's Mrs. O'Boyle that pushes that to the limit because, I mean, granted, because of the way that Mrs. O'Boyle acts toward him, Frank can also be hostile toward her. And so Mrs. O'Boyle actually puts down an ultimatum.
He belongs in the home for wayward boys with all the other riffraff.
Mrs. O'Boyle.
I won't live or work in a house with a gutter snipe like him. If he stays, I go.
Oh, Father, please don't let Mrs. O'Boyle leave us.
Yeah. So,
riffraff and gutter snipe.
Yeah. The words in this are so interesting. I mean, we've talked on this show previously about how sometimes especially when it comes to 90s kids vernacular, the writers can often they have no clue what the kids actually said. They just say things that they think sound hip. And so, because of...
You mean like hip?
Yeah. And so, because of that, we get lines from Jamal like this.
Ready for one dynamite, dude?
So real...
They tried.
Yeah. But with this, it's almost like the dialogue, the vernacular is almost kind of supposed to be square. So I feel like they really kind of went for it when it came to these little phrases. I mean,
The
one
jargon of the time.
Yeah, one that they do all the time. It starts with Frank, and then Catherine picks it up, and then I think by the end, Dr. Connellan says it. But Frank's always saying, ha-cha-cha! And I'm just like, are they all just big Jimmy Durante fans? Like, what?
Why wouldn't they be, frankly?
Ha-cha-cha! I mean, to me, that's the only way to say it. You got to say it like Jimmy Durante.
Obviously, you do.
But yeah, I mean, it's that, and I think, let's see. What's really funny is some of these one of the characters will say, and the other characters will react like they just said "fuck you," you know. It's just like I think at one point Catherine pronounces horse feathers. You know, that's the closest I can get to her accent. And you know, and that's met with like shock and awe, and Dr. Cannellan at one point calls someone a windbag, and that is also shock and awe. And
but gutter snipe is fine.
Yeah, and I think Frank at one point says bushwop. At least that's the closest I can get to what it sounded like he said.
I hope that's what he said.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, and then at one point there is a coal salesman that keeps saying "tough little cuss," describing Frank. Yeah.
Oh, so good.
But yeah, so you know we've set up this time. So like I said, they are trying to figure out who is doing this, and they get visited by Ghostwriter. Of course, they react the way any of the kids ever have. You know, they freak out. There's a very interesting scene when Ghostwriter first appears to them, where he appears to them and, you know, he writes, you know, hello, Catherine, Frank, or, you know, something like that. And there's a point at which the letters are still up, and Frank wants to get something on the other side of the room, so he crawls underneath Ghostwriter's letters. And I'm like,
I mean, I'd be spooked.
Oh, okay.
I feel like that's very rational, frankly.
But then later on, he like tries to touch them, and Ghostwriter like forms a weird like design around his hand, and then whooshes around the room. I'm just like, that's so weird. We've never seen anybody try or not try to touch Ghostwriter. It's like
point.
It's kind of weird that nobody's tried to do that before.
Good on you, Frank. That's the first thing I do. I think if all of a sudden there were letters, spectral letters that showed up, I'd be like, can I touch it though?
Sure.
But can I touch it though?
I will say, you know, Gabby has hugged Ghostwriter,
right.
in a sense. But yeah, it's just, I was like, I'm kind of surprised we've never seen that before. That's so weird.
Well, I feel like it's the tactile curiosity. If you're encountering something that you've never met with before, like, you want to touch it. You want to use your five senses to engage with it. Like,
yeah.
Good on him.
Yeah,
good
I mean, it only makes sense. But yeah, so as they are talking to Ghostwriter, you know, they realize that he can help. And they're asking questions like, you know, if anybody else can see him, and he's like, yeah, you know, my friends, you know, mentions all of them by name. And, you know, so then they're like, well, wouldn't it be great if they could help us and we could all get together and solve this together? And so they ask Ghostwriter, so where are your friends? We want to meet them. And he's like, they're in this room. And I'm just like at first I'm like, that's not very helpful, Ghostwriter. Why are you being that ominous? And then when he says the same thing to the team, when they ask about Catherine and Frank, and he says they're in this room, I realized Ghostwriter doesn't realize he's gone through time.
Traveled in time. Mm-mm.
No, he has.
I think they informed him once they figured out when it ended up happening. Like they got all these clues because they're like, oh, try to figure out where they are because we're looking all around. They can't find them, and they figure out where time he actually is. Like, yeah, you go, you traveled through time, dude. And he's like, oh, that explains a lot.
He's like, no wonder I'm so tired. Which, you know, introducing the fact that Ghostwriter can get fatigued. That's also something interesting.
Just casually. Add that on top of time travel, whatever.
Yeah, I will say though, when they have Ghostwriter look around the room for clues as to where they are, and every single piece that he brings back is all specifically from the year 1928. I was like, that's a little.
Really though, but really
yeah,
though.
It's like, I mean,
These
you know,
up to date people, man. They like to stay current.
I guess I'm just like that. like, you know, I've had like posters and stuff in my room. They're all from different years. There's no way all of them are gonna be, number one, from the same year, number two, the year that I'm currently in. So, I mean, you know, a little TV magic so that they can figure it out. But obviously, you know, it is a shock on both sides that they are talking to people from different times. You know, you've got the kids in 1993 talking to the kids from 1928. And yeah, it gives them all a head trip. Oh yeah, I do want to really quickly mention, so, you know, we mentioned that he does eventually get back to the team. What actually brings him back? Because he's talking to Catherine and Frank when he comes back to the team, is they all write letters to him, basically letting him know that they want to help. And basically, their letters summon him through time. I'm just like, wow.
Well, because the thing about it is, like, the episode, what is it? Get the Message, I think, was the one that I'd been watching for a bit. Is like he started to fade away because there was discord in the group, because I think like he genuinely loves these kids.
Oh yeah.
And so whenever they were fighting is like that was difficult. Like literally the words were, "You are hurting me."
Yeah.
And so when his friends need him, like he's going to be there.
Sure. And you know, like that episode or like that story indicated, he does gain strength from their unity. So it kind of only makes sense that would be what brings him back to them. But you know, once we've got this all figured out, that basically we're gonna solve a mystery through time. I love that none of them ever asks, why is it so important that I mean, I guess at one point they do ask why Ghostwriter's helping Frank, and Ghostwriter mentions that it will save the team. He doesn't know how, he doesn't know why, but it is kind of odd, you know, this mystery about a tea set seems important enough to time travel for.
The clear correlation, easy.
Yeah. I mean, totally. You know, tea set, it's one of the most important things in the world.
Clearly.
But yeah, so I mean, we establish. I think I mentioned it earlier that Frank wants to become a doctor because basically his father disappeared. You know, he was going to go to California to basically set them up and, you know, send back for them. So either he left or he died. And then his mother, having to work 2 jobs, got sick, also died. But hers was specifically because of her heart, which inspired him to want to be a doctor. Because, you know, typical kind of...
He wants to help people since he couldn't help his mom.
Exactly. It's the typical kind of doctor inspiration story that you usually see in shows like this. Let's see. Oh, we also establish that Frank has a secret hiding place, which is basically a brick in the wall, where he hides letters that were between his parents. It's basically the only connection he has to them, and his diary, which is what Ghostwriter basically
picked up on.
Yeah, and time traveled through. Also, I didn't mention, but when he said they're in the same room, Catherine lives in the house that Jamal now lives in. It's this exact same house. And it's actually pretty interesting to see the same house redressed for one time period to the other. I mean, I will say their version of the 1920s kind of looks like the type of set redressing you would get in like a community or university level theater.
I mean, let's face it, Ghostwriter was not like a multi-million-dollar budget TV show.
Yeah,
you do what you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad. It's just, you know, it's pretty basic.
It is what it is.
Yeah. But yes. So basically, the team decides eventually that the best way to help Frank and Catherine, because Ghostwriter says, why don't you teach them how to solve a case? Because that's what they're needing to do. That's what you guys do all the time. Although I will say half of their cases get solved by no means of their own. They just kind of happen to walk into them, which kind of happens here too. But we'll talk about that in a second. But they eventually decide that the best thing to teach them is how to make a case book. Because at first they're all arguing about, different things. And then Gabby points out, guys, all the things that you're saying you need to teach them, they're all involved in making a case book. Let's just teach them to make a case book. And they're like,
I remember watching this when I was like 7 and 8 years old. And like, I went to the school store and I got myself a little notebook. And you better believe I wrote a case book on the front of it.
Absolutely.
I got one of those pens on a necklace. I was all about it.
Absolutely. The official Ghostwriter pen.
I never got that fancy.
On a string.
I just got a pen on a string.
Oh, well,
I think it was one of those cool ones that had like 4 or 5 different inks that you could click down.
Nice. See, that honestly is actually closer to what they have on the show. Because the official Ghostwriter pens were just pens on strings that said Ghostwriter on them. They didn't have that.
They were legit.
Yeah.
Good on them.
Oh, but yeah. So they break down step by step how to do the casebook, and I will say, even watching this through, I was like, that's a lot for him to take through time. Is he going to be able to take all? And he does this one. He's able to take that. I will say though, there's a little animation that they show every time Ghostwriter travels through time. And when he's got this big, long explanation of how to set up a casebook, it's like this time tunnel, and he's like bouncing off the walls. So you can tell he's carrying a lot. It's hard for Ghostwriter.
It's a burden. How dare they?
A heavy, heavy burden.
Summaries, honey. Summaries. Headers and summaries.
Oh, yeah. So, they get the message and they start making their casebook. And of course, their first 2 suspects, because they don't really know anybody else to put in there yet, are Mrs. O'Boyle and Lucy. And it's like, well, they are the only other 2 people in the house. But that Frank is suggesting them just as kind of like a get back, like you're blaming me.
These are only suspects. Go ahead and argue with me.
Yeah. They
do kind of have motivation, because like it's really pretty clear that Mrs. Boyle does not like him.
Yeah, and like I said,
like you said, Lucy wants her sister back, so she's also got motivation.
Yeah, so they have that. Like you said, they have motives. They have a motivation, but they do not stay the only suspects in the casebook for long, because we discover that also in the house that day was the coal man, the guy that brings the coal. Obviously this is a house in the 1920s, so they need coal for fires to keep things warm. And also eventually we discover that a Ritter brush man, basically a salesman who worked for the Ritter Brush Company, going around selling various brushes, I would assume, who named himself as Millard Fillmore Smith.
It's a mouthful.
Yes. I remember, this is one of the biggest reasons I remember this episode, because this was the episode that taught me who Millard Fillmore was, because he's not exactly a president that comes up in a whole lot of talk about presidents. Apparently, though, he's Mrs. O'Boyle's favorite president. The few things I know about Millard Fillmore is that he was a Whig, and like most Whig presidents who actually got to serve a full term, he got there because he was the vice president to the guy that got elected, and he died. So he got. In fact, we've had 4 Whig presidents. Only 2 of them were elected because they both died in office. So, yeah, fun little fact for you.
Little factoid.
So, they write down both of those people in their case book. But around this time, we also, on, our 1993 side, we start discovering that Jamal's dad is not feeling great. Basically, Grandma comes in the room and says that she has to go pick him up from work because he, just isn't feeling great. When he comes back, he tries to act like it's nothing. Of course, then he collapses on the stairs, and they insist on taking him to the hospital. But yeah, so we've set up something going on, and it's like, Frank wants to be a doctor. Jamal's dad's real sick.
He's a doctor.
I wonder if this
Sometimes
is connected.
they are not subtle.
No, not really. But one thing that I did, I had to take a double take because there's a scene when, they're setting up the whole casebook thing, and then Catherine gives Frank a pen, and it's basically a Ghostwriter pen, the same thing that the team does. They have pens that they hang around their neck. And then I thought, wait a second, this is 1928. They don't just have like the Bic pens.
No.
These are
this
like
was a very expensive
nice.
gift.
Yeah, pens were not easy to come by at this point. And I will say they did at least give they did look like large pens. I mean, I didn't get like a great look at the pens, but they didn't look like they just, went down to the store and got a Bic. They did get like a larger looking pen. I mean, at this point, I don't know that much about the history of pens specifically.
Make pens, so I know a little bit.
Okay, so what would have been like a fountain pen at this point?
Yeah,
or?
Typically at this point it would be a fountain pen because, plastics were not super widely used in the 1920s, not
Right.
quite yet. So in order to make something like that, you had to have either somebody who was a whittler or a wood turner, some sort of carpenter.
Okay.
Because the interesting thing about pens, no matter when they were made, is you have like the wooden components and then you have the metal components that actually allow you to write with it. So for her to have given him a pen back in 1928, like that was a time. Yes, that was a huge gift. Because like we can go down to like Office Depot and get a pack of like 20 Bics for like $2-3 bucks. But like the kind of pens that would have been created back then, the kind of pens that like I sell is that sells easily for like $45-$60. So the fact that she is giving him a pen, like that's a huge gift. It's like symbolic, but it's also like that was not cheap.
No,
it doesn't matter when you were, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how much thought they really put into it beyond, it wouldn't just look like a normal pen, because fountain pen wouldn't have that have also required an inkwell.
Yes, it would have.
So really he should be traveling around with an inkwell around his neck too.
Twist pens. I don't know when that came out.
Sure.
Because the twist pen is it's a spring loaded, so it allows the mechanism to push the nib forward.
Gotcha.
So I don't know when those came out.
Yeah, probably 1928.
You're gonna have me researching the history of pens. Clay, come on, man.
Well, I will say you've already provided much more background than we would have gotten otherwise. So
happy to be of service.
No problem. But yes, so they have this pen. They don't have extra inkwells hanging around their neck. So, let's hope they don't need to write a lot.
Here's hoping it's not a fountain pen. Otherwise, it might get awkward.
But Alex and Jamal have basically been enlisted by Grandma to clean out the basement, because Jamal was already looking down there because he thought, they live in the same house as Catherine. Maybe somehow some of their stuff got left behind. Let's look. They do find an old police gazette, which was actually something I didn't mention before. Something that Catherine was fascinated by was old police gazettes. In fact, there is a scene early on where
her father found it, right?
Well, Lucy finds it. Lucy finds an old police gazette in Frank's room in the basement, basically just trying to get Frank in more trouble because, she's a snot. And knowing that Catherine will get in trouble if he knows that it's hers, and knowing that he's already in trouble, he basically says, yes, it is mine. Get me in more trouble. Lucy's happy, whatever. But that is something that we continue forward here because the boys find one of Catherine's old police gazettes in their basement. And back in 1928, they have decided that it's got to be the coal man because they see him coming out the front door of the house. Why would he be going to the front door? The chute's in the back. Yeah. And they see him carrying a sack, so they're like, oh, that's got to be more silver. Oh! And they jump in the back of his truck, which I'm just like, there's got to be better ways to tail this guy than, two kids jumping in the back of a coal truck. Eventually, he easily knows that they're back there. And the moment they jump out of the truck to try to sneak up on him, he just picks them up and he's like, what are you kids doing here? I will say that the coal man was actually played by Charles Mann, who was a football player at the time, which honestly, when I read that, I was like, oh, good. Because I was like, his delivery wasn't great. I'm sorry, what did you say?
That dude was massive.
He was. But, this show kind of did a lot of stunt casting. In the last episode, we actually saw Bo Jackson. If you remember him.
Jackson.
Yeah. Bo knows
Gave
cameos.
Jamal a high five.
Yes. But yeah, so, they realize that it's not the coal man, which discourages Frank quite a bit. Even though they still have other suspects, basically he just believes that they're not going to find who it was, and he doesn't want to go to the home of wayward boys, so he is really contemplating running away. So, at this point, they're getting desperate. So I love that they actually come up with probably the same thing that any of us would have come up with first and been like, you know what? We've got people helping us solve a case in the future.
The future?
Yeah. Maybe they could just look up in the newspaper if this was ever solved and let us know. So that's what they do, which is great. I'm like, at least they're being straightforward about the fact that they're cheating. It's like,
oh yes,
you may as well though. I mean, to be honest though,
people from the future, that'd be my first thing. I'd be like, I'm being accused of this. Hey, it'd be great.
Yeah, well, and honestly, like, this is the same types of things that the kids have Ghostwriter look for all the time. It's just not,
happens to be through the vortex of time and space.
Exactly, but they're constantly like, hey, look up this name and see if he did such and such, and he brings it back to them, So this isn't all that far-fetched from what they typically do. It just so happens that there is a time-traveling component in it. I will say, though, because there is a time-traveling component in it, Ghostwriter struggles because he's been going back and forth between 1928 and 1993 several times throughout these episodes, and he's starting to get a little tired.
Understandably.
Yeah, so, it forces the kids basically to have to think creatively. Both Frank and Catherine and our regular Ghostwriter team both end up having to simplify their messages, simplify their words, so that Ghostwriter can send these smaller messages. Because the tireder he gets,
the verbosity is killing him.
Yes. The more tired he gets, the less he can carry, through the time vortex.
He's a little fun drive, basically.
Yeah, I will. So, the team goes to the library to look up these old Brooklyn Eagles for this story, and thankfully they at least know the specific year they're looking for. I would have at least told them like the month, or at least the month to start with. I mean, yeah, Ghostwriter can't carry a lot, but a whole year, that's a lot. That's a lot to read through. But, you know, at least they got something. They do eventually find the article that they're looking for, but no sooner do they start writing down the information than it starts to disappear.
Dun, dun, dun.
Ooh, because time travel. I will say, in all of this, you know, obviously, you know, the newspaper article is starting to disappear. Jamal's dad is starting to get sick, something that we'll touch on in a second. Actually, you know, we may as well talk about it now. Frank became a doctor specializing in pediatric medicine and actually performed heart surgery on Jamal's dad when he was a boy. So, you know, literally saving Frank will save the team, because eventually, if, you know, time doesn't go the way it's supposed to, not only will Jamal's dad die, but Jamal will have never been born. But at no point during this does Jamal show any signs of fading or fatigue or anything.
That would cost too much in the graphics department.
I mean, they don't have to make him fade, but, you know, maybe he's come down with something too, you know? It would just kind of make sense, but, you know, they don't do that. They just focus on Jamal's dad, and that's fine. But, yeah, like I said, the team do get the information, but just as they send back the information for Frank and Catherine discovers that Frank has run away. Oh my goodness. So with Frank having just run away, you know, Catherine is upset, and she finds Lucy down in the basement where Frank is. And actually, Lucy's the one that tells Catherine that Frank ran away. And Catherine starts trying to reason with Lucy. And this is where we get kind of the reveal of why Lucy has been the way she's been. You know, that she's jealous of Frank and all this kind of stuff. So eventually, they work together. In fact, Ghostwriter appears to Lucy. I will say, I feel a little bad for Lucy because she gets to meet Ghostwriter, and it's like, oh, this is so awesome! You know, this being that communicates with words, and I mean, you know, that's pretty cool in 1998, but that's mind-blowing in 1928 when you have no technology even somewhat similar to what Ghostwriter does. But literally, Lucy gets to talk to him this one time, and then once the case is solved, she never gets to see him again.
Well, I mean, you almost feel bad for Calvin, because Calvin, like, misguided as he was, like, I don't think he ever saw Ghostwriter.
No, but I mean, the whole point of that was because, you know, Ghostwriter appears to people who, you know, like he says, he can tell by their heart. Calvin would just use him, or
Calvin
try
was
to use him.
shit.
Yeah, exactly. Calvin doesn't deserve to see him. But
Correct.
Lucy, you know, as you know, as horrible as she has been to Frank, basically rooting for him to lose his home and, you know, go to, you know, kids' jail, basically, you know, just because she wants to spend more time with her sister. She does eventually kind of see.
Well, I mean, it's an understandable motivation, you know,
especially for a child, you know, and
exactly.
I believe she was playing, you know, somewhere around 8 to 10. I think the actor was like 12 at the time, but, you know, that's a reasonable, you know, age range. But, you know, Lucy and Catherine work together, basically using, because Lucy, as part of her, you know, basically just being a little shithead, had been breaking into the basement every time Frank wasn't there. And I don't know how she knew about the hiding space when Catherine didn't, but she found Frank's letters and was reading them and his diary. Just 'cause. But
That was a really sad book.
you know, it does actually come in handy because one of the times that she does that, she forgets to leave, to put a letter in. Frank leaves it out. And when he leaves, you know, he takes all the other letters, but Lucy has that one. And it just so happens to be the one talking about the train that Frank has gone to.
You know, just by coincidence.
Yeah, you know, coincidentally. So, you know, they figure out, you know, this the 20th century train, and Lucy, because Catherine gets ends up having to distract her father, goes to try to stop Frank from leaving. And you know, eventually, it's actually a pretty funny scene because Catherine has all of the information about the thief, who we find out his name is Reynard Wilcox, and he's basically been stealing silver from several different houses throughout the neighborhood. And she gives the information to her father to call the police. And when he's doing this, he's like, call Frank. And Catherine, at this point, believing that Frank's not there because he's gone to the train, just starts, half-heartedly, Frank, Frank, and he's like, I could have yelled. It's that typical, kid parent thing. It's like, I could have yelled. I want you to go get them. And of course, that's when Frank appears. And, he and Lucy have made up. Everything's good. And at that point, we see on the 93 side that, Jamal's dad is all of a sudden better. He's been steadily getting worse, but now that, they have the information about the thief and Frank's not running away anymore, he's good. He's better. But Ghostwriter still isn't back. And so, they realize that, Frank had to have, they had to have solved the case considering the fact that Jamal's dad is better. And this is when they also discover that Frank was the doctor who operated on him, and that's how all of this tied together. But they also know that Ghostwriter's still not back. So they try to get in contact with Frank, thinking that maybe he can tell them where Ghostwriter is, and they discover that, unfortunately, Frank died the year before. Like May of the year before.
Couldn't have held on for just
I know. And I like
That'd be too easy.
I'm just like, man, Ghostwriter, why couldn't you have gone to solve this case like a year before? So they could have met him, but that's not how it worked out. But they get the idea from Jamal's dad, because he's joking about, grandma writing his obituary. Well, why don't we look at Frank's obituary, find out about his family, see if they can help us? So they go to the library to read his obituary, discover that he actually married Catherine, which on one side sounds real sweet, but on the other side, it's like they grew up together. That's a little weird. I mean, yeah.
They weren't biological siblings.
No, they weren't. It's just like, it's that story of like, how'd you guys meet? Oh, we grew up together.
Blech.
Oh, like friends? You were like neighbors? No, we lived in the same house.
We lived in the same house.
Okay.
Concerned.
All right. Parcheesi, anyone? Yeah, that's just kind of a little awkward. Although, 1928, stranger things were still happening. There were still are families at that point marrying first cousins. So
gross.
Yeah. But they find out that Catherine not only married Frank, but she's now an author who writes detective stories, who actually researches in the very library that they're in, and wouldn't you know it, she's there at the moment. So they meet Catherine. It's all fun and happy. and they talk to her about, Frank, and, ask her if she knows what happened to Ghostwriter. And apparently, they just assumed after the case was solved that he left because they tried writing to him again and he never responded. So they determined that he must have tried to go back through Frank's diary because that's the way he got there. And that the diary might be in his secret hiding space, and it just so happens that their friend Jamal lives in the same house that she grew up in. Yes. So they find the brick. I will say, in like a previous scene, in I think like episode 1 or 2, there is a scene where Jamal and Gabby are like talking up against that wall. That loose brick is very easy to spot. It's not a hard
like an animation
thing
where the one that's just slightly colored, you're like, oh, that's the book she's about to read.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you can tell there's no mortar around the actual brick. You can tell it's loose. But they take a second, they find it, they pull out the diary. Ghostwriter is in there. There is much rejoicing. And they party with an old woman. So yeah,
as one does.
Yeah, the day is saved. So Alicia, is there anything about this story that you wanted to talk about specifically that we haven't already mentioned?
Honestly, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of it. Like, I'm really, it's very interesting because I don't know if I know this is kind of like slightly unrelated. They've remade Ghostwriter. Have you seen that?
Yeah, they're okay. This is actually, they've remade it twice.
Yes.
They tried to
I think
reboot
once it was in like 1997, right?
Yeah, they've tried to reboot it like a couple years after this one ended. And it only lasted a season. And yeah, now it's back on like Apple TV. I will say, I haven't watched either one. But what I've read...
The trailer looks legit. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, really? What I've read about both of them is that neither one are the same story.
Sure. No.
Because I believe what I've read about the Apple TV one is that it's more about introducing the kids to literature than anything else.
It is. Because if you look at the trailer, and this is why I'm kind of... Because when they were first introducing the idea of, this is going to be a time travel, I was so nervous that like Ghostwriter would find a way to put them back in 1928, and I was like, I feel like that would take away a lot of the magic.
Yeah.
Because the new Ghostwriter that's kind of what ends up happening is he brings these classic literature like Kipling's Jungle Book, Lewis Carroll's Adventures of Alice in Wonderland. Yeah. Like he brings the characters out of the books
to life
to the kids.
Right.
Yeah. So while I enjoy that, and of course, as somebody who had a background in literature, like that was what my bachelor's degree in was. I think that's interesting. But I don't know, just there was something about the magic of Ghostwriter coming out when it did.
Yeah.
That I think is just so special, and I don't really think that it's something that can be replicated. But that's for sure something that I was really glad that he didn't do. That Ghostwriter didn't suddenly get this great cacophony of powers where he could bring the kids back to 1928 to be able to solve the mystery and team up.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard enough for him to do it, and he didn't even know he was doing it.
So I'm kind of glad that they kind of showed this human-like frailty to Ghostwriter.
Yeah.
Because, it's very easy to see him as like this all-powerful creature, but I think that's one of the things that, especially as a kid watching Get the Message, is that he's affected by the things that the team does, that there is a very human side to him, which is where I started to be like, okay, well, but who is Ghostwriter,
Yeah. Yeah, so. He has his limitations, and it's
he
nice
has his limitations,
to know that.
And I loved that.
Yeah.
It's because it made him more human-like, and I thought that was amazing.
Absolutely. All right, well, before we finish up here, we do have a couple of segments that I would like to do with you here. So the first one that we are going to do is a little thing I like to call Ghostwriter Fashion. And as I have mentioned, in the show several times. This show took place in the 90s. And if you were not alive in the 90s, yes, definitely the early, I mean, they mentioned several times in this episode that it's taking place in 1993. But because of that, if you're not familiar with 90s fashion, it was very interesting.
It's awful. Call it what it is, Clay. Yeah. It was awful.
Yes. But I mean, I started this specifically to highlight Lenny's hats, because in the first several stories, she wore lots of big, crazy hats. Eventually, I had to change it because she started wearing less hats, but I will say, I was shocked that in this story, Lenny wears 0 hats.
0 hats, not a hat to be seen. She's more mature now.
I kind of prefer the hats because she still has very interesting fashion. So what we're gonna do is I have put together a couple of my favorite pictures of just various members of the team, or various things in the story, and the fashion they're in, and we are going to talk about it. As always, you can follow along with us on the Instagram page, which is the Flying Cow Pod on Instagram. You can check that out and follow along as we discuss this. So this first photo, I always start off with Lenny's looks because, like I said, I started the segment because of Lenny. So we always start with her. And I will say, number one, let me just give the kind of defend Lenny a little bit. This is probably like the worst angle of this outfit I could find.
Iconic.
There aren't great ones. It's not a great outfit, but this is probably the worst angle, because in the angle here, she is sitting, and because of it, it makes her shoulders look massive.
And her waist looks like emaciated.
Right. I will say, though, that is because she is wearing high-waisted shorts, which I kind of like the look of like high-waisted jeans in the right, with the right outfit. I don't think this is it. And I mean, it's one of the few times I've seen high-waisted shorts. Gotta say, at least at this moment, not a fan. I will say
it's the combo of the high-waisted shorts with the leather belt, with the knee socks, with the mustard yellow stripes. But I think it's kind of cute, because if you look at the two of their shirts, like she has vertical stripes and he has horizontal, and they're both wearing the same awful colors.
I mean, honestly, I don't mind the colors so much. We've mentioned that Lenny has kind of a very bohemian taste, like,
Well, she's a musician's kid,
right?
Like,
exactly.
Dress weird.
I will say her look changes quite a bit, though, as we'll talk about. But my biggest thing is she looks like she's wearing wallpaper.
Yes.
It looks like
that is something you would find in grandmother's basement.
Yes, it looks like she went to the wallpaper store and said, make a shirt out of this.
Shirt out of that.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, I also think that the combination of a long sleeve shirt and the shorts, and you can't really tell in this photo, but the shorts have basically like white walls on the side. They've like, and it's not even like all the way down the side. It's like a triangle cut on the side of white. It's odd looking. This is not
match your socks. It's fine.
This is not a great look for her. And also, I don't know what they're doing with her hair in this shot. Close up, it actually looks cute, but in this kind of far away, she looks like
a mother.
Well, yeah, it looks kind of like Sabretooth. Like it's that like thick, kind of almost like Muppet hair.
Does that extend down to your back, ma'am?
Yeah,
Muppet hair. That's
it just like it almost looks like a lion's mane. It's so. And honestly, I think that if the outfit wasn't as bad as it is, that the hair wouldn't be that big of a deal.
The hair would be tolerable, but it's everything together.
Everything on her looks so thick.
I respect her decisions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if she wants, it's such an odd. I will say though, sometimes I look at the things that they put her in, and we've mentioned this in the last episode, and it looks like they're just trying too hard to hide her shape, for lack of a better
she's
phrase.
Supposed to be a kid still at this point, right?
Right, but
like what age would you guess that the group is for the most part?
I mean, at this point, in 93, they would have been the majority of them would have been around 13, 14.
Exactly. Like,
so yeah,
because the way that it goes is that these are adults playing middle and high schoolers. And so the fact that she's woman,
sorry. I'm sorry. The actors would have been 13, 14. The kids probably 12, 13.
But yes, I mean, she's starting to get a woman's body, and so you don't want to. And I think that's one of the things I actually did respect is none of the girls on the show were ever like Daphne. You know what I mean? Daphne was sexualized. Velma was sexualized. Like, they never did that to the girls in the show, and I have a lot of respect for them.
I mean, the girls do occasionally wear things more form-fitting, but I don't know. Yeah. And they've even let Lenny wear things like that, but she seems to be the one. Yeah, but she seems to be the one that they try to take it back from the most.
Right.
I don't know. It's just it. I think part of it is that they're just trying to give her a weird look. This was not the right weird.
Again, like you said, bohemian.
Yeah.
She's an artist.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've talked about this one enough. So let's move forward.
It's a lot. It is a lot.
Okay. So,
yes.
obviously, Jamal is wearing a shirt I mean, it's wild, it's crazy, but honestly, you would have seen Will Smith wearing this on Fresh Prince.
Oh, 100%. I'm pretty sure he wore something very similar to that.
But once again, Lenny, because apparently they can't pick a lane for her, looks like she's getting ready to go to a cocktail party.
Poor thing.
I mean,
are those? I can't tell with this particular. Are those pearls?
It looks like, I don't think they are. I think it's just like a white, beaded
like a silver
necklace,
chain or something like that.
Something like that. But yeah, at least now. Granted, this is a very fuzzy photo. It's the best you can do when you're taking pictures off of YouTube of things that were probably recorded on a VHS. But
100% they were.
Yeah, and when you look up close at the dress, it's not that formal. But at least from it does look very, when you compare that last look to this one, you wouldn't think the same character would wear those two looks.
Exactly. They don't seem to go like you said, it's a bohemian tend of style, because they like to occasionally throw in there, oh well, she's actually a musician. She actually writes music, and that made me laugh.
I think sometimes they nail it, but
yeah, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, this is totally one of those girls that I grew up with that was constantly writing poetry and making her own music. Yeah. And I thought that was something really cool that they did is in one of the episodes of Get the Message is the song that she had been working on the entire episode. They actually made it a song.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, they did that with her all the time. Yeah.
And I think that's great. I think that's cool.
But yeah, I mean, apparently her fashion just got trickier and trickier as they went. But okay, so this one I wanted to bring up for a couple of things. Number one, a few episodes back, we noted that Tina suddenly had bangs. Well, now suddenly Tina has no bangs.
Good for her. Bangs are typically a terrible decision.
She is growing them out. I mean, I will say there are some. You can tell that they're still around her face. Yeah, she's behind her. They're growing. Sure. But she is getting rid of the bangs. That's at least how long it's been since between the last episode and this one. A good bit of bang growth. But also, Lenny, once again, now I opted for this photo just because it was easier to see like the look of the outfit. But this is not a separate piece, at least that's not the way it looks in the full view. It looks like this blue is one outfit and she's just wearing this kind of vest thing over it. It basically looks like she's wearing pajamas with a vest over it.
You know what? Yeah, let her live her best life. I wish I could show up to work in pajamas and a vest over it. Absolutely, I'd show up like that.
But not just pajamas, a onesie.
Well, no, teacher, I can't show up in just pajamas, man. That'd be amazing, though. Miss Farrar, are you wearing fuzzy pants? Yes, I am. Stop judging me.
All right, let's take a look.
Look at those suspenders.
Yeah. Okay. So I had two photos, and I had to pick this one because I'm sure it's just the way that the kid is standing, but he looks real poochy. Like he's just kind of like sticking out his gut. He just kind of looks like, you know. This is the scene where the police gazette has been found, and so you know she's feeling guilty, as you can see, and he is like, you know. Like, oh,
about to
man.
stand up for his woman.
Exactly.
Good on him.
But yeah, this
I think
is
it's
just
both poaching his gut out and more puffing his chest. He's working on it.
well,
he's misguided, but
the other photo, the one I chose not to use, he is, you know, he's got his hands in his suspenders and he's puffing his chest out because that's the one where he's actually defending her. But I decided to use this one, you know, because let's be as embarrassing as possible. But yeah, this is just kind of to give an idea of the period dress that they're using. I'm not a historian when it comes to fashion, so I could not tell you how period accurate it is. I mean, I probably looking at it would have thought more 30s or 40s than 20s.
Even like early 50s, for sure.
I mean, on hers, possibly. I will say...
Pretty sure my mother owned that dress.
Sure. I will say, and this goes into, this is a shot of Lucy in her pigtails.
1920, even little girls would not have shown that much arm.
Well, I mean, I think it, because that was also the period of the flappers. So
true.
There were...
Pretty sure the kid's not a flapper, though.
No.
She's not protesting.
I will say, though, now definitely the boy with the suspenders, that's not a look you would have seen. But I feel like these dresses, I saw at least a similar style I saw when I was growing up.
Right.
Of course,
I like the idea of Lucy as secretly like a suffragette. Like she's actually fighting for women's votes on the down low. That's what she's rebelling with the short sleeves.
Absolutely. This is just a shot of Frank in his hat. He realizes that Lenny's not wearing a hat, so he's got to pick up the slack.
Exactly. It's a pretty sweet hat, though, man. Pretty hat.
All right, so we have mentioned that next to Lenny's hats, Gabby and her hair is one of the second most interesting fashion things in this show. And I've got these two shots. Number one, because this is in the same scene on the same day. The first one I want to take a look at is the one on the right-hand side, because that thing, it basically, it looks like a small beehive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had long hair at one point. Whenever you put it back, like...
Yeah, I never did anything like that. It was never that long.
You never did a man bun, Clay? Never did a man bun?
No, my hair was never that long. Like, it came down to my shoulders. Long. Like, it would make like a small little ponytail. It would never do anything like that.
Because this is Gabby, right?
Yes, this is Gabby.
Yeah. What I think is beautiful about Gabby is, like, she is very distinctly Hispanic. Like, she's very distinctly Latina. Yeah. And so, like, she has the hoop earrings and she has all these beautiful things that are so distinctive of her culture. And so she has this beautiful, voluminous hair. And as somebody who has big hair, I can tell you, like, your bun will shift on a daily, like, a minute by minute basis. And so sometimes I will take pictures just like this, where you look at me from the side and the bun looks completely different than it does from the front. So,
I mean, I will say, You can tell though, because like I said, I've got these side by side pictures, because one, it is a definite like beehive. It's honestly a really cool thing. I had one from the back, but I had too many pictures. I couldn't put them all in.
Right.
But this other one from the side, and I think what it was a continuity error, and either the person that did her hair in one of them wasn't available for
Lunch break.
Yeah, exactly. But these are two different styles.
Well, it's two different takes, I bet you.
Yeah, I'm sure that it was. It's just
you take your hair down, you put it back up, and it never looks the same as it did before.
I will say I do love this kind of beehive thing that she's got going on in the right. But like you said, another reason that I wanted to include this is because we're all the time ragging on 90s fashion, and while this isn't necessarily a look you'd probably see commonly now, it's actually a good looking representation of 90s fashion.
I have the long sleeve version of that shirt.
Okay, yeah, but you probably wouldn't see the
More
short
purple,
sleeve.
but
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Flat never goes out of style.
Yeah. But yeah, it's looking good. I just thought it was interesting the hair continuity. It looks like her beehive flattened.
I mean,
Just
somebody's
lost a
probably
little
like,
hair.
baby, it's stuck up high. Just start smacking it down.
All right. Okay, so this we have a shot, and I didn't mention this actress before, but the older Catherine is played by Augusta Dabney, who actually was apparently a big soap opera actor, and I think she's actually pretty good in this part. I really enjoy her performance here. But she is in this picture here with Gabby, and I'm just saying, does anybody need a pocket? Because Gabby's got spares.
Hey, first of all, girls' clothing typically doesn't have pockets.
No, it's true. It's true.
Pockets,
Yeah,
I'm about that life. Like
she's
when
just got a vest made of pockets.
Cargo jeans came out, like I was about that life. I was like, I have a pocket here and 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 a pocket here, everything. I don't even need a purse today. This is the best life ever. This is what guys deal with all the time. That's amazing.
It's true.
Good on her.
I'm just
all her pockets.
Gabby
It is funny.
has
What
a
is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I don't know if those green and orange patches are actual
4
pockets. But
yeah, I mean, they're at least in the shape of pockets, but yeah, I don't think, I mean, unless they're just open pockets and they don't have like a,
they're faux
a flap
pockets,
like
which are
the
the
others.
worst because you get so
yeah,
excited.
Yeah.
And then you try to put your hands in there and they're nothing but lies.
But yeah, Gabby has a history of odd vests. She had one a couple of stories ago that it was a jean jacket vest that just had plastic letters. Oh no, it wasn't letters, it was numbers. Just numbers dangling off all over it. It's
probably like the magnets fell down and she's like, let's make it fashion.
All right, but that is our fashion segment. So, before we finish up, I do have a couple of questions to ask you, Alicia. First of all, who in this story was your top suspect? The character in the episode that was either your favorite or you thought was just the best for one reason or another. It can be anybody. Doesn't have to be somebody in the main team, or it can be an extra or ghostwriter for all I care. It's up to you.
Well, it's really tricky. Well, because like, of course, I was a big Wuthering Heights fan when I was growing up, and so this idea of, oh, this is kind of the rough and tumble boy, and same name, wasn't it? Catherine was in Wuthering Heights, and so I saw a lot of parallels with that. So of course, I kind of enjoyed their dynamic. Sure. I was always a Jamal girl. I love Jamal because I really like the fact that, especially in the early 90s, is there was not a lot of multicultural casts, especially for kids shows. Like it was all white kids all the time.
Yeah.
And so for him to be kind of like the glue that held everybody together, which is why I thought it was so profound when Ghostwriter is like, save Frank, save the team. Because it really kind of makes it clear, is because Jamal's kind of like the glue for that group.
I mean, they made it clear in the last episode. If it hadn't been for Jamal,
They never would have found Ghostwriter. They never would have become a team. Like,
Yep.
I loved seeing that he was the brains of the operation when everybody was falling apart. Like, and I thought that was something that was just really, 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 really beautiful about the show. And so Jamal was definitely one of my favorite characters, no matter what episode it was. But I definitely, when I was going through this with my casebook when I was a little girl, I wanted it to be the lady that hated him. I wanted it to be her, so just so you'd be like,
Sure.
your
Mrs.
hatred was
O'Boyle.
unfounded. Shame on you.
Yeah.
You were biased for no reason. I was pleased with who it ended up being because it was
Yeah.
more of a mystery. But I wanted it to be her
Sure.
because she was rude.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, they, Frank stays living there and she stays working there, and I'm just like, you don't
To make
need
sure
her.
that he behaves. I'd be like, I'm going to be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Like, if I
Yeah.
take an extra piece of bread, are you going to accuse me of stealing that too? Nope.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think they tried to make it seem like she was somewhat somehow positive, and I'm like, I don't see that at all. She's not positive. She's
Like, oh, I'm going to stick around to make sure that he behaves. Why? So you can threaten him with going to the boys' school
I mean,
again?
she literally accuses him after they've discovered that he didn't steal the tea set. She accuses him of leaving an adult-sized footprint in of coal, and I'm like, you're not even paying attention. You're just looking for things to blame him for
to justify your bias.
Yeah. No,
so
I
really
didn't
wanted
like
it to
Mrs.
be
O'Boyle
her.
at
I was
all.
kind of bummed when it wasn't.
Yeah.
But oh well.
But yeah. So for mine, honestly, I'm giving it to Catherine. Both versions, old and young. I mean, number one, like, seeing that girl kind of reminded me of things I saw in my childhood, and I think she did a good job. I mean, I think both her and the girl who played Lucy, when you see them in a scene together, you're like, okay, these are good child actors. They're actually,
They're believable as siblings.
Exactly. And I mean, no shade to the kid who played Frank. He's not on their level.
He's very green.
Exactly. He is very green.
There's not a lot that he did outside of this.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And both of them did a lot before and have done a lot after. And you can tell why. But yeah, I really liked Catherine, like I said, both versions, old and young. And so, yeah, I'm giving Catherine as a whole top suspect for me. So, with that being said, what was your rewind moment? The moment in the episode that was either your favorite or the one that made you go, wait, what?
Because I grew up, I loved horror stories and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when Ghostwriter's like, oh, they're in this room, and I'm like, what? They're in the room? Like, yeah. I loved that. There was just something very like akin to horror stories of the killers in the house, and I just thought that it was really funny to me. Like, I just started laughing at that point. I had to, because it was like the killers in the house. I think that was one of my favorite moments, and it was so like. It was so subdued. It was really funny to me because of my background.
Sure. Well, and for a show that whose lead character is a ghost, there aren't a lot of
horror elements.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of spooky things in this show. So yeah, that was kind of like ooh, shiver.
Exactly. I was just like, ooh.
Yeah.
Ghostwriter's actually acting like a ghost.
Just a little bit.
It reminded me of like a seance, is because it's like old school like Ouija board scenes, and it's like, oh, they're in the room, and I loved that little tiny bit of horror element, because of course that really confused the kids on both sides of the time stream.
Yeah,
it's like, what do you mean they're in the room? I would full blown panic and be like, start searching everywhere with a baseball bat.
Well, I mean, the kids in 1928 do
casually. Yeah. Oh, they absolutely do.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's pretty good. I like that too. Okay, so for mine, so I briefly mentioned it, but there's a scene after Jamal's dad collapses in the basement, where he's sitting on the couch and Grandma is like, okay, you're going to the hospital. And he's like, no, I don't need to go to the hospital. And she completely just ignores anything that he's saying because he just keeps protesting, saying, no, I don't need to go to the hospital. I was just dizzy. And she's just not, she's just like, oh, that's nice, dear. Jamal, give your father a coat because it's cold outside. And just continues forward with this plan.
Maternal. Like a lot of the TV shows, like you don't ever see the parents. And so not only to see the parent, but to see the parent's parent, like I really liked that dynamic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, it's great because by the end, he's like, no matter what I say, you're just going to continue forward with these plans to take me to the hospital. And so finally he's just like, I guess I'll give in. And she's like, that would be best, dear. Let's go. Exactly. And it's just, it's great. I mean, I've mentioned before, the Grandma Cece, whenever, especially when she gets something, really juicy or really fun to do, she's just a bright spot in the show. So,
she's very joyful. She dances. It's cute.
Yeah. So a shout out to Marcella Lowry for that scene. Definitely a bright spot in the story. So let's see. Okay. So here is the next question. First of all, if Ghostwriter were real and he wrote to you, would you write back? And if so, what would you say?
Oh man. Are we talking about like me right now as my age currently or when this came out? I feel like that's a very important distinction.
I've never had anybody ask that. So, I mean, if you've got something for both, feel free to lay them on me. That's fine.
As a little girl, I was super, super imaginative. Like, those weird girls that were like, they couldn't tell you what they ate for lunch, like an hour ago, but they could name off all the Egyptian and Greek gods and goddesses like it was nothing. That was me.
Sure.
It didn't lend itself to me having a whole lot of friends. So, and this is way pre Harry Potter. So somebody randomly writing me through a diary is not going to cause me that much suspicion. No. Me, when this came out, I was like 8 or 9 years old. That would have been the greatest day of my life, is because that meant that I had somebody who was literature based, who was based in words, which of course were so important to me, especially back then.
Right.
And I was able to express myself and be completely open. Like that would have been the greatest day of my life. I probably would have just written back and forth with them all the time. 35-year-old science teacher, Miss Farrar. I was like, how can I explain this scientifically? Can I show this to my students to get them to enjoy books? And can I have Ghostwriter co-teach on how to engage with the text? They're like, hey, Ghostwriter, can you go ahead and underline or highlight all of the verbs? These are the things you need to, like, of course, it's a very different mentality, I think. So, like, when this show first came out, I definitely would have been like, will you be my friend? But now it's like, how do you feel about conjunctive verbs?
Yeah, it's like, you're a teaching
Can you help
tool.
me teach my class?
Yeah, of course, then you'd run into the one snot in the class that can't see him.
Can't see it. Yeah. It's like, that's because you're a bad person. Moving on. Nah, I wouldn't be like that. That'd be funny, though. The things you wish you could say to kids.
Oh, geez. That's great. Oh, yeah. All right. All right. That's good. I like that. All right. So, first of all, I have to ask you, you mentioned, do you know the identity of Ghostwriter?
So, fun fact. I kind of figured it out. I remember when I was a little kid.
Okay.
And I remember just being like 8 or 9 and just making that connection. Sure. And it was right after I had watched the Get the Message episodes. And for him to be like, we have to join together. We have to be unified. We have to, the team is falling apart. And to have the knowledge of who and what he used to be, I remember just crying as a little, like, I didn't have any way to confirm it, of course. And of course, the PBS got taken away after that.
Yeah.
So I remember it was probably, about 9, 10 years ago when all of a sudden Ghostwriter popped back in. And this is the way, before a lot of the streaming stuff. And I was like, I want to know if what I thought he was true. Mm-hmm. And I looked up and sure enough, I was like, oh my God, I was right. I was like, me and my little casebook with my string pen. I wrote it down somewhere, and of course, the notebook's lost to time and space as well. But yeah, I remember just being so struck by that, and like just being incredibly emotional. And I'm like, that makes so much sense in regards of who and what he is.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, number one, kudos to, how old were you?
8 or 9.
Kudos to your 8 or 9-year-old self, because I never would. But yeah, I mean, that's astounding that you guessed that, especially at that age. I mean, I will say, I too think it, when you put everything together, I do think it makes sense. Yeah. All right. Well, this is the time when I give everyone the opportunity to get in contact with us if they would like to. So, if you want, I am the Flying Cow Pod everywhere. The Twitter is at the Flying Cow Pod. That is also the Instagram. My email is theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. There's also a Facebook group, The Flying Cow. If you have any thoughts about this story or any of the previous ones, you agree, disagree with us, let me know. It'd be great to talk to somebody about this show. But Alicia, if you have anything that you would like to share, anything that you're enjoying in pop culture that you want people to know about, and a bonus if it lifts up the voices of women or people of color.
Shoot. A show that I fell in absolute love with is Raising Dion. If you have not seen that on Netflix, Raising Dion is probably one of the best, like, it's basically the story of a little boy who gets superpowers and his single mom trying to raise him with what he's capable of doing. And if you have not seen Raising Dion, it's such a beautiful depiction of a Black family, and they just love each other. And like, no matter what happens, that's a pervasive message, is like, their love is what keeps them together. Their love is what grounds Dion and allows him to be somebody who is good. If you have not seen Raising Dion, definitely check that out on Netflix for sure.
All right. Well, mine, I watched this just recently, and it was one of those things that the moment it came out on Netflix, I wanted to watch, but it took a while before I had time. But I watched The Queen's Gambit on.
I've heard so many good things of that.
And like, here's the thing. Number one, I was interested in it because, as I may have said previously on the podcast, one of my jobs is actually, I work with an after-school program teaching kids chess. So
yeah, when I knew you were playing a lot of chess.
Yeah, I mean,
you always beat me, so whatever, it's fine.
I played here and there. I'm nowhere near her level. But it is, it stars Anya Taylor-Joy as basically a chess prodigy. And part of what really drew me to it is that, you know, they even mention in the show, chess is a game dominated by men. Like even on the elementary school, middle school level that I'm on, I have been working with my program for over 4 years now, and at least in the schools that I've been in and that I have worked with, we've never had a girl class champion.
Aww.
Yeah, and just
well, it's like Dungeons and Dragons, same basic idea.
Yeah, and so
very male-dominated arena.
Absolutely,
which is a bummer.
And so just to see the idea, I mean, yes, unfortunately, it is based. It's based on a book. It's not based on a true story or anything. It is fiction. But just seeing the fiction of a woman being dominant in chess, it's something that I have wanted to see for so long. And then the show itself is just so good. Like, I mean, I have yet to see, there's definitely some things I haven't seen yet, but I've yet to see a performance from Anya Taylor-Joy that I at least wasn't interested in her performance.
I loved her in Peaky Blinders.
Sure. I mean, I haven't seen that, but I've heard great things about that show, so I can imagine.
It's speaking of the 1920s.
Sure. But it's so well done that they don't pull punches. She's in no way perfect. But you also kind of understand her flaws. And it's just like there is a relationship that she has with her adopted mother that is so interesting. It's just fascinating, the whole show. And plus the chess is, I mean, they don't like show large portions of chess games or anything like that. They show enough for people who are interested to realize that, okay, they actually got experts to drill them on the chess, and it's real. They're not just making stuff up. But at the same time, it's not a show just for people who like chess. Anybody can get into it. And like the ending, like if you just described it, it would sound like the typical Hollywood happy ending. But it's earned. It's so earned. And it's really good. Right now it's a limited series. I don't know if they're going to do more. Unless they have a story, I don't want them to do more because I like what it is right now. But I mean, it does create, I mean, the production is absolutely beautiful. Like every facet of it, it takes place in the 60s. And it's very reminiscent of Mad Men. A lot of people have made that comparison. The production, at least the sets and stuff. But yeah, it's just a great show. I really enjoyed it. So you can check that out. That's also on Netflix. But yes, so we will be back next time, or I will be back next time, with an episode that sees Tina going to middle school. And
what a horrible place to be.
But she befriends an exchange student. And then she gets lost. It's called Lost in Brooklyn. Yep. That's what you got. But thank you so much, Alicia, for coming on to the podcast and doing this with me. This was a lot of fun.
Not a problem. This was fun.
Yes. So, like I said, we will be back next time. But until then, Ghostwriter out.
I give up. I give up.
It's always easier that way, dear heart.